Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and move into the presentation portion. Here we are.
All right, am I good to go? Okay. Hi, good morning. My name is Siobhan Gorham. I'll be hosting this presentation today. I'd just like to start and say we're going to be talking about freshwater plants. When people generally think about plants, they tend to think about trees and flowers and grass and things that they see in their yards and on land. But today we're going to talk to you about the many different kinds of plants that you might find in the lakes and rivers and streams near you. Again, my name is Siobhan Gorham. I am a researcher with the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I work in freshwater wetlands with my team. And I chose this line of work because I love being outside and I love working with plants. My team members are in the field today, so let's check in with them.
Good morning. I'm Craig with the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I work on the Freshwater Plants project, and we study the different plants that grow in our lakes, rivers, and streams, and the wetlands, and they are an important part of our Florida ecosystems. They grab energy from the sun and pump it into the food chain. They provide food and habitat for all kinds of fish and wildlife, and they filter the water to keep our lakes clean. Today we're on Lake Toho to take a look at some of the different plants that grow in our lakes. Come on, let's get this boat in the water and go for a ride.
So to start off with, I'd like to just talk about some of the reasons that plants are important to all of us. First, they create the oxygen that we breathe. They filter pollutants and toxins out of the water through their roots, and they grab energy from the sun and pump it into the food chain through a process called photosynthesis. Plants are, like animals, are able to adapt to their environment. And adaptation is a characteristic of a living thing that helps it survive in its environment. And here I have a picture of a banyan tree, and you can see that there are roots hanging down from the branches instead of growing underground. There are some underground as well, but these aerial roots are an adaptation to a wet environment. So this tree generally grows in wet areas and needs to have exposed roots to exchange gases. There are 5 main types of aquatic vegetation that represent different adaptations to a wet freshwater environment that we're going to talk to you about today. We have a group of woody plants, emergent plants, floating leaved plants, floating plants, and submerged plants. Let's check back with Craig to see if he's found any examples for us.
Here we are near Goblet's Cove on Lake Toho. We're looking at some of the different kinds of plants. We have some plants that grow from the bottom all the way out, like this spike rush here. And we have some over here that's a little bigger than the spike rush, that's called bulrush. Other kinds of plants grow from the water and they send a leaf up that floats on top of the water, like the big round lilies here. This one is American lotus. Lotus has a very pretty yellow flower, which we can see quite a few of them blooming over here on the edge. Another type of plant grows all the way underwater, and we have some of those here too. Under the water here, I hope you can see there's what we call eelgrass or tape grass. I'll see if I can reach down and pick one up. This is very good habitat for fish. When we start seeing this eelgrass and tape grass, growing in the water. We're looking at floating plants now. This one is a native plant called frog's bit. It actually floats on the surface of the water. And there's a real little one here beside it. It's called salvinia, or water fern. That one floats as well. Floating plants have highly developed root systems that can obtain nutrients or their food out of the water. So they don't need roots going into the ground, they get it out of the water. We find woody vegetation or small shrubs along our islands and on the shorelines. This one is called wax myrtle. It grows into small trees up to 20-25 feet high. And another one behind it with a longer leaf, long skinny leaves, that's willow. We find Carolina willow actually growing in the water and then a lot of times up on the land beside the water. Willow trees can get over 25 feet tall as well.
All right, now we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the adaptations of these wetland plants. Our first group is woody plants. They typically grow on the edge or in shallow water, and they even sometimes will grow on floating mats of vegetation. You can see here in this picture, this is a mat of vegetation that's gathered together and formed a sort of mini island, and on top are some woody shrubs growing. And the people in this airboat are actually pushing it out of the way. Woody wetland vegetation prevents erosion or prevents the sediment from washing away, and they also provide shade for fish as they lean over the water. Cypress trees and water tupelos have wide bases to help stabilize them in wet environments. The next group we're going to talk about are emergent plants. Emergent plants are rooted underwater and then have aerial parts that grow above the surface of the water and live in the air. They generally photosynthesize here and flower and reproduce in the air. These kinds of plants also stabilize the bottom sediment by having root systems in the sediment, and they provide habitat for fish and birds. The next group is floating leaved plants. These plants are also rooted into the bottom sediment. They also send leaves upward, but their leaves tend to rest on the surface of the water. Many have big showy flowers like this water lily flower. And these plants provide shade for fish and wildlife and plankton underneath. Some of these plants have flimsy stalks that allow the leaves to rise and fall with the water level. Others have more rigid stalks that stand above the surface of the water when the levels drop, like this American lotus. Floating wetland plants are not rooted underground. They live their life at the surface of the water with their leaves and flowers either on the surface or slightly above. They have special adaptations that allow them to hold air in their cells so that they float, and they have roots that hang below them in the water, and they're specialized roots that can get nutrients directly from the water. They tend to move with wind and waves. And this water hyacinth, though pretty, is actually an exotic plant in Florida, and it can outcompete or get nutrients better than some of the local native plants. Submerged plants live their life underwater. This allows them to grow in deeper water than the other kinds of plants we've talked about. Their blooms are occasionally the only part that will reach the surface, but it will still stay below the surface. And we have both rooted and floating submerged plants. Our team does a lot of research on eelgrass, and so much so that we have collected samples from all over the state of Florida and Mississippi and Alabama, and we keep them in aquaria in the lab to be able to access them and make comparisons and do all kinds of research and take microscope pictures. Now that you've learned about different types of plants, let's see if you can identify them in the field. Let's check back with our Freshwater Plants crew.
Hey guys, I'm Jamie. Now that you've learned about the different types of plants we study, we thought it might be fun to take you out in the field with us and show you some of the tools and techniques we biologists use to study and collect vegetation. We study plants from boats, from the water, and from the shore. Waders are an important tool used by field biologists when working in the water. They create a barrier between us and nature. They not only keep us dry, but they protect us from the environment and protect the environment from us. Looks like Maggie has found some spatterdock. Can anyone tell me what category of plant spatterdock is in? If you said floating leaved, you are correct. Like lilies, spatterdock is rooted in the sediment, and its leaves float on the surface of the water. Maggie is now headed to our next plant. Let's check in with her to see what she's found.
Hey guys, right now I'm surrounded by spike rush, which is an emergent plant. As you can see, it is emerging from the water. If I was a largemouth bass, this would be a great hiding spot.
One of the most common tools we use for plant research is a frotis. As Maggie is demonstrating here, a frotis is a long pole with hooks at the end. They can be used to collect plants from a dock, a boat, or the water. To use, we reach the pole into the water, twirl, and pull the plants up. Looks like Maggie has collected some eelgrass. Can anyone remember what kind of plant eelgrass is? If you said submerged, you are correct. Like other submerged plants, eelgrass grows completely under the water. Sometimes we are in areas with too many plants to survey them all. A quadrat is a tool we use to get a sample or a snapshot of what kinds of plants are present and helps us to estimate how many plants are in an area. Here, Craig is using a quadrat to estimate how much bulrush is in the area. Does anyone remember what category of plants bulrush is in? If you said emergent, you are correct. Like spike rush, bulrush is an example of emergent vegetation. Some plants are easy to collect and observe, like these water lettuce and water hyacinth, which we can pluck right off the water's surface. Can anyone tell me what category of plants these are in? If you said floating, you are correct. These plants have adapted to grow while floating on the water's surface. Next, Amanda is going to talk about another plant that is easy to observe, this time from a boat.
We just pulled up to some nice big cypress trees. These are known as woody vegetation. You can kind of look at the big base of these cypress trees. They're also known as buttresses. They get wider when these cypress are actually in the water. You can also see these little tiny pieces of wood poking out. Those are the cypress's knees.
Occasionally, we need to study plants underwater. Here, Amanda is using her snorkel to check on some eelgrass. Does anyone remember what kind of plant eelgrass is? That's right, eelgrass is an example of submerged vegetation. All right, guys, we've got to get back to work now, but thanks so much for joining us and enjoy the rest of MarineQuest. See ya!
Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation. We've provided a bingo for you, freshwater plant bingo, for you to do at your leisure in class. And now I guess we can take some questions if there are any.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we'll go ahead and move into the Q&A portion. Craig, if you want to go ahead and share your screen there, we'll move into our questions, which looks like we got a couple here. We had a few submitted ahead of time. So let's see, we have a question here from Kevin, who asks, what is the most challenging part of your job?
I'm not muted. Okay. I don't know. I think sometimes just scheduling, getting out into the field around weather, getting out into the field when the water levels are the right height. So yeah, we can't always schedule our work as easily as other people because it is so dependent on the conditions outside.
Makes
How about
sense.
you guys?
I agree with that. I think especially being in Florida, we get a lot of rain, so sometimes it's hard to do all the field work we have and deal with the weather conditions at the same time.
Looks like we have a question from Jennifer here. What is, has there ever been something really unexpected that happened while in the field or maybe even in the lab?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the general rule is something unexpected is guaranteed to happen in the field. And I think actually a really consistent part of field work is just being able to troubleshoot and be prepared for when your equipment breaks or a giant thunderstorm rolls in all of a sudden. So you should expect unexpected things in the field.
Excellent. All right, I think we probably have time for one more question or so. Cassandra asked us, what then is your favorite part of your job?
Jamie, you want to go?
Sure. My favorite part of the job is working outside, and I'm sure my teammates might agree with me. We enjoy being in the lab and at our desks, but what really makes our job special is being able to spend so much time outside in nature, watching wildlife. Being around the water is really enjoyable.
That's also probably my favorite part of the job, is going outside all the time. But another part is with our job and the projects that we work on, we also get to travel all around the state of Florida sometimes. So I get to see all these places I've never seen before, and it's a lot of fun.
I'd like to add the airboat's also one of my favorite parts.
Excellent. All right, well, we have a comment here that says, thank you for all you do, and we appreciate all the hard work. So I think probably on that note, that's a nice thing to go out on. Thank you all for joining us here. Big thanks to our biologists, our Freshwater Plants team here for joining us. And we hope you have a great rest of MarineQuest and have a good weekend. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.